Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another gameplay impressions video, and today we're going to be taking a look at The Order 1886 for the PlayStation 4. This title was sent to me by PlayStation Portugal so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. As you can no doubtly see, this video is being done in post-commentary, mostly because there are a lot of cutscenes in the game, and I'm going to be constantly interrupted as I am trying to present the game if I was to do it in live commentary. So I opted to do it in post, which will allow me to give you guys a better presentation of what this game is all about. And I already know that a lot of you guys are going to be wondering what exactly is the length of the game, because that YouTuber Play Me Through essentially uploaded the entirety of the video game onto the internet, and it was about 5 hours, 30 minutes, whatever. My personal playthrough, I can tell you that I finished the game at this point. It was 6 hours and about 30 minutes for me. Now, this was in normal difficulty, and I wasn't necessarily going too much out of my way to get all of the collectibles and all of that stuff. So can the game be played through in 5 hours or less? Yes, if you play on easy and if you skip through everything and just run on ahead, yeah, you can play through the game in 5 hours or less. And it's not even going to be that challenging to achieve a time like that. Now, a lot of you guys are going to be saying, then, is the game worth it? Like, what's the deal here? And what I have to tell you is I am not a believer that game length equates to game quality. I'm going to bring up a couple of examples. Like, I would like to very much bring out Vanquish, which is one of my favorite games that I've ever played, and it took me about, I don't know, 6 to 7 hours to complete. Same thing with God of War 3, for instance. It's also a pretty short game, but it is still a great experience. So it all depends on whether or not you are going to enjoy the experience of the video game. Now, for me, it's kind of hard to get into that particular mindset with The Order because I'm not a huge fan of the Victorian setting, which is something that leaves me in a really somewhat awkward position for Bloodborne, but I'm hoping Bloodborne makes up for it with gameplay and whatnot. But in terms of back to the Order 1886, it's like I'm not a huge fan of those, you know, Victorian London settings and whatnot. So, I mean, the game doesn't really speak to me as much as it would speak to a fan of that particular era. So if you like the idea of being a badass knight from an order that dates back all the way to King Arthur and fighting against werewolf half-breeds and rebels to protect the people of London, if this sounds like a good thing to you, then you're probably going to enjoy The Order 1886 because that is what it's all about. It's all about the story. There is a big emphasis on the story of The Order 1886. There's not going to be a lot of replayability. I mean, there are a couple of collectibles that you can pick up if you really want to, 100% the game and all that. There's a lot of newspapers that you can pick up and take a look at. There's a lot of pictures that you find as you go through the game that you can inspect, and you can get to know more about that particular world. So it's all about how invested you can get yourself into the world of The Order 1886, and that is what is going to determine whether or not the game is worth it for you. And I can't answer that. And even though I've seen a lot of people say, oh, The Order 1886 isn't worth it, I kind of find that is somewhat unfair to make a statement like that, because like I said, if you're into that particular setting, and if you like werewolves, it's actually a really good game. Like, the animations on the game, which is something that I personally, it's just, to me, the animations always trump graphics. The animations on the game are amazing. The presentation of the game is awesome. I mean, I really like the art style that they bring. Even though I'm not a huge fan of that Victorian setting, I still like the art style. I like the graphics. The game is beautiful. Although there is one thing that constantly broke immersion for me that I kind of have to mention, and that is the fact that in a game that pays so much attention to detail like The Order, because there's just ridiculous amounts of detail everywhere you look, it was a little bit jarring whenever I saw a mirror, it wouldn't reflect characters. I was like, is my character a vampire or something? What's the deal? Mirrors essentially don't reflect anything. And that, I mean, they reflect the they reflect like the backgrounds, and they reflect the walls, they reflect all that stuff. They just don't reflect the characters. And I was just like, oh man, come on. All of this graphical detail and mirrors are kind of broken in a way, you know? That kind of broke the immersion every now and then. But apart from that, I mean, everything else The detail that has been put into this game is just amazing. The physics engine on the cloth of the clothes that your characters are wearing. Particularly something that I have to mention is the animations on the contextual sensitive melee takedowns. It's just so good because wherever your enemy is located when you're doing a takedown, you're going to get like an animation that is relevant to that location. Like I remember near the end of the game, I got this animation where I just smacked this guy against a brick wall and there was little bits of dust coming out of the wall as I smashed his face into it. I thought that was pretty cool. The game also has a bit of gore, and it wasn't really over the top when it came to gore, I didn't think. However, it does have mature content to the point where I can think of 2 scenes off the top of my head where I've experienced full frontal male nudity, which is something you don't usually see a lot in video games. And I'm talking, yes, full frontal male nudity. Now, they're usually pretty fast, so you don't see too much of it. But yes, they are definitely there. Now, when it comes to the frame rate, which was also another big thing about this game, because I just mentioned cinematic experience at the start, and I would just like to say that in my opinion, cinematic should never be directly tied to frames per second. This is my personal opinion. Having said that, the game is running, I'm not sure if it's 30 frames. It kind of almost feels like it's a little bit more than 30 frames a second. But it could just be due to the fact that if it is 30 frames, it is one of the smoothest 30 frames that I've ever had on a video game, because I did not see a single frame drop throughout the entirety of the experience. And the frames were just so smooth that it never really got me thinking about, oh, is this doing 60? Is it doing 30? The only reason that even pops into people's heads is because of the sentence that was said that's like, we're doing this game in 30 FPS because it's a more cinematic experience. If they never said that, that would have not even been a talking point, because the game just runs smoothly. There are no instances where it's like, oh my god, the frame rate is atrocious. Never. It has never happened as I've played through the game. So, I mean, I just wish people sometimes wouldn't put their foot up their own mouths, which is essentially what happened here. I mean, Bloodborne, I think, is also going to be locked at 30 frames a second, and you don't see everybody talking about it because nobody mentioned it. But anyway, getting right down to actual gameplay, which is something I haven't even talked about yet. I've just been talking about cinematic and cutscenes and all that. The basic of the gameplay in The Order 1886 is that of a third-person cover-based shooter. Yes, if you boil it down, if you distill it down to when you're actually playing the game and you're actually in full control of your character, it is essentially a third-person cover-based shooter. Now, is it a good shooter? Yes, I think it's a real good shooter because the graphics are good, the gunplay is good. There's a wide variety of weapons that actually feel different. So like you have the shotguns feel very different from, for instance, if you're using the, I don't know the actual names of weapons because I'm not very much a gun guy, but there's a bunch of rifles that you can use. And there's a specific rifle that seems to be used a lot by members of the Order. So the gameplay of you playing with that particular rifle, because it's got this like compressed air thing that it does, just like pushes people away and stuns them. The gameplay of playing with that versus playing with something like a shotgun, very different. The gameplay of playing with the machine pistolet, which is kind of like this automatic pistol that you shoot, almost like an Uzi, versus playing with the duelist revolver, which is this revolver that shoots 2 bullets at once, is very, very different. When you put in things like the thermite gun is awesome. Essentially, this is a gun that shoots like thermite pellets or bits of thermite, whatever. And whenever those pellets hits, it leaves this little cloud of thermite in the air, and then you shoot a flare that just ignites that. So it's like a long distance flamethrower type deal with this weapon, and it is a lot of fun. And it's fun because you can use it in different ways. Like you can essentially shoot thermite and then shoot the flare and it's going to ignite the thermite, or you can shoot the flare and then shoot the thermite and you just see this big ball of flame appear as you are shooting thermite against people. So that particular weapon I really enjoyed. There's also this like rocket launcher that uses some kind of lightning technology, some kind of Tesla technology going on there that I also thought was pretty fun. As a matter of fact, there's even like a gold trophy for using that weapon. It's something really, but it's very, very deadly. Just shoot the thing, blows up everything around you. So that's pretty cool. There's an arc gun that shoots like this lightning from it, and it just explodes people's heads. There's a big variety of weapons, essentially, which kind of make it an interesting game. On top of that, there's also the melee takedowns that I've talked about, which, you know, give you the option of just running on ahead and just stabbing someone or killing them in different ways. So the gameplay at its core is pretty good, but there is something that I feel I need to bring the attention to, which is the fact that there are a lot of cutscenes. So if you're one of those kinds of people that doesn't like to be constantly interrupted by cutscenes as you are playing your video games, then The Order 1886 might not be the experience you're looking for, because there are a ton of cutscenes. There's also quite a few QTEs, QuickTime events, and I mean, it's just something that goes hand in hand in a way with cinematic experiences. Something that came to mind as I was playing The Order 1886 is that there's several things that they take that I kind of feel that are inspired by games like Beyond Two Souls. Now, I'm not saying that's the kind of experience you're going to be getting, because something that I felt when I played The Order is I felt a lot more in control of my character than necessarily when I played Beyond Two Souls, which was even more cinematic than The Order 1886. So you will be in control of your character a lot more than a title like Beyond Two Souls, but there's also several sections where you will have to deal with the QuickTime events. There's also a couple of sections where you do this thing called the Cinemelee, which essentially your character will stab. You'll use your knife and you will start like a stab fight against Lycan. That is very, very heavy on the QTE, so you do have to kind of like use the right stick to dodge, and then you have to do light attacks and heavy attacks and whatnot. And I mean, it's all about how much you enjoy or don't enjoy those things, because there's a lot of them throughout the game. Apart from that, the voice acting, I have to say, is some of the best that I've seen so far. The voice acting is really, really solid, as it needs to be, because, I mean, let's face it, this is, like I said, again, that word, cinematic. This is a very cinematic experience. Therefore, if the voice acting wasn't believable, then the game wouldn't be that believable. So the voice acting is top notch. At least I personally believe so. I really enjoyed the voice acting throughout the title. The graphics also really bring the game to life when you're doing these cinematics, because they create a believable universe. The attention to detail that this team has had by going to London and taking pictures of everything, textures, all kinds of crazy stuff, the attention to detail that was brought to this game is noticeable, even if the experience is, you know, shorter than maybe you would expect, because these days it seems like there's some kind of a standard that AAA games need to have a 12-hour campaign. Even if the campaign is shorter than you would expect, you can definitely see the amount of detail that was placed into this world. Now, whether or not this is something that you have a problem with is, again, like I've mentioned at the start of the video, it's all about how much do you value length. And to me, while I do value length, I don't think it is the top thing that you should be getting out of a video game. I've had much more problems with other things in the game. If we want to talk about a little bit of not so positive aspects of The Order 1886, I would like to bring out the stealth sections. I was not a fan of those, particularly because you're talking about knights who usually get shot multiple times throughout the game and they survive. And on these stealth sections, it's like, oh, you happen to be seen once and you get shot once in the face and you die. And it's a little bit frustrating, because you constantly throughout the game as you are playing, because the knights have this black water that they can drink, and they just like it regenerates them. So there's a lot of sections where you see people like getting shot up and they just like come back, no problem. And then when you're doing these stealth sections, it's like you get shot once and boom, you're dead. It's over, game over. It's like instant failure state. And that is where I had a couple of problems with it. But I understand why they're doing it. They're kind of like forcing you to do stealth. It's just I don't like it when games force me to do stealth. So the stealth sections I kind of felt were not a highlight of the title. There's also some investigation sections where you can go around and look at newspaper. There's a bunch of collectibles that you find throughout the game. Like I said, newspapers, pictures, and stuff that can really immerse you more into that particular setting. Which again, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Victorian London setting, so I didn't really see much reason to immerse myself more. I would pick stuff up. I would pick up journals and I would look at them and I would just read the headlines. You would actually have like full-on text that you could read that would give you entire details and newspaper articles. It was not really something that I was that interested in. So I would pick them up. I'd read the headlines and I'd be like, oh, okay, Jack the Ripper strikes again, something like that. Speaking of which, there's also references to Jack the Ripper as you play through the Order 1886, but I'm not going to say too much about that because I don't want to reveal a whole lot about the story, since I feel that a big portion of how much you're going to enjoy this game is going to be based around how you enjoy its story, because there's a huge emphasis on the story of the game. And essentially, if you don't like the story, if you don't like the setting, you're not going to like the Order. It's that simple, because that is what it boils down to. While there's a lot of gameplay where you're doing cover-based shooting stuff, like taking cover, shooting people, blind firing, all that stuff, the emphasis is very much on its story. It is telling a story. And speaking of that particular story, it is a linear story. So there's not a lot of decisions that you are actually going to be making throughout the game. There's a couple of decisions that maybe tell you, oh, you didn't actually stab this guy. Instead, you grabbed this lamp and you bashed his head in. So, that is one of the decisions that I've noticed. There's also decisions that you can take as you're doing gameplay, like let's say, okay, there's a staircase going up and there's a tunnel going forward, and you can decide, okay, I want to go up the staircase, in which case your knight will say to the other knight that's with you, oh, you take the tunnel and whatever, and I'll cover you from above. And if you take the tunnel, the other guy will say, oh, I will cover you from above, and that kind of stuff. So there are decisions that you can take, but usually you go from A to B, and whatever paths you take in between, you're going to end up at the same spot. There's not really a whole lot of story decisions that you're going to be making. It's just a story that is being told and you are playing through it. So again, if you're not the person that enjoys linear stories, then maybe the Order 1886 isn't for you. If, however, you don't have a problem with that, well, there you go. But yeah, this is the Order 1886. It is basically a very cinematic experience. And remember, once again, I cannot stress this enough. Don't link the term cinematic experience with frames per second. It just makes you look silly. It is a very cinematic experience. There's a big emphasis on presentation, eye candy, animations, the storytelling, the voice acting. It's just all about presentation. A lot of people have even said that they feel that Ready of Dawn has kind of made a movie and you kind of just play through it. And in a way, it does feel like that, which is why I brought up Beyond Two Souls. And whether or not you like those kinds of experiences is going to vary from player to player. But again, I just don't like the fact that people over-focused on length, because some of the best games I've ever played were not that long. And as a matter of fact, for those of you that don't know, the current world record of playing through Dark Souls, for instance, is like less than 90 minutes, and you can kill every single boss. So, yeah, length shouldn't really tell you that much. Anyways, that is it for this video. As per usual, leave me all your comments, feedback, all that kinds of good stuff in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
We'll see to it.